investing in loss, abiding in the depth of stillness, simultaneously all of creation stirs. Invest in loss. Over the last several decades, this phrase has not only frustrated and terrified me, it's also guided my life into depths of understanding, creativity, and love. Hi, I'm Darren, and in this video I'll be sharing my experience of what I've come to see as a profound teaching. It makes sense to me now, though when I first heard the phrase, invest in loss, it sounded pretty strange. It's a catchy way of translating a teaching from Daoist philosophy, and it's something my Tàijí Chuán teacher used to say to me. If Daoist philosophy is new to you, it's a classical Chinese perspective sharing some subtle and deep stuff about life. And if you don't know about Tàijí Chuán, it's a Chinese art with martial, medical, and spiritual teachings based on the principles of the Tàijí symbol. Tàijí symbol. So one day after class, my teacher, Master Kimball Paul, turned to me and said, "Invest in loss." Of course, at the time, I had little to no understanding of what the heck he was talking about. I just figured it was some funky Daoist thing he liked to say. And though he passed away years ago, still I continue to learn from him and to miss him. What was my teacher trying to teach me? After over 30 years, I think I may have discovered some insight on it. And since I'm into Daoist philosophy and martial and healing arts, I'll be exploring it from these perspectives. In Tàijí Chuán practice, there's a saying, Fàng. I translate this as ungrip. Tàijí Chuán practitioners might have heard their teachers say, relax completely. For me, ungrip better captures the actual experience, at least as an English language translation. So for me, it's not just a passive relaxation, but a choice to participate in an active, ongoing dynamic. So when my teacher told me to invest in loss, I have a sense Master Kimball was directing me to ungrip or lose excess muscle tension in my practice, to lose my shoulders, as the martial arts saying goes. Ungripping excess muscle tension allows the body to move with more flow and ease. Contracting muscles more than necessary and then trying to move is like pressing down the gas and the brake at the same time. Ungripping also improves proprioception, awareness of the body's position and movement in space. There's my arm. More kinesthetic awareness allows me to feel subtle shifts in balance. Ungripping physically also impacts mental calmness. When the body is relaxed, the mind tends to follow. And just as I can hold on to physical tension, I can also hold on to mental grips, fixed ideas, judgments, and emotional attachments. And when my mind is tense, my body follows. Fàng encourages me to resolve these mental grips, allowing for greater flexibility in both body and mind. This is what invest in loss means to me. Invest in loss teaches me I can lose my grip on fixed ideas and open a space within myself to breathe. When I ungrip my muscles and breathe, and when I ungrip my interpretations to subtly observe the difference between what I think and feel and interpret from what I actually know. In these open, in-between spaces, I found an experience of a deeper understanding of life. Investing in loss or ungripping is a continuous process of cultivating harmony and balance. For me, letting go of mental grips has been a process of transformation, a conscious, active process of discovering, remembering what was there before all my interpretations. It's ironic that investing in losing my sense of self helped me find myself. There's a story about a professor who visits a Zen monastery to speak to the head monk. When they meet, the professor explains how he'd like to learn something about Zen, and then proceeds to share with the monk all his credentials, the papers he's authored, the books he's read on the subject, which other Zen masters he's hung out with, and all that. The head monk pours tea for the professor as he quietly listens. And as the professor continues relating all he's learned, the monk continues to pour tea into the professor's cup. And the cup soon overflows, and the tea begins to flow over the table and onto the floor. The professor eventually realizes what's happening and becomes startled and stops talking. The monk explains, "How can I teach you anything new if your cup is already full?" I believe Master Kimball was telling me to invest in losing what I know in order to empty my cup. Instead of avoiding empty spaces and as a compensation, building up my sense of self, really embrace loss of tension, loss of a built-up hardened self, and invest deeply in learning something new by discovering, experiencing the treasures of insight that lay within. So how do I find that buried treasure? I find that treasure when I pause to observe my thoughts, my internal experience. When I experience conflict, I return to curiosity, even in the midst of strong emotions. I don't push away the response. I allow myself to be uncomfortable and just acknowledge it. Challenging, yet certainly possible. As I continue to observe the space within, staying in a kind of gentle neutrality, new ways emerge of understanding this conflict, my inner story. And the more I go into that inner journey to observe my inner stories, my inner mythology, the more that buried treasure appears and the more my life transforms. In Jungian psychology, it's a school of psychotherapy founded by Carl Jung. Myths are seen as more than simple stories. People who study this approach say myths serve as crucial psychological tools for understanding ourselves, processing complex emotions, and navigating life's transformative journeys. This seems true for me. In my experience, these inner stories are sophisticated symbolic language, one that communicates fundamental truths about my psychological and spiritual experience. So the more I can handle observing my inner stories, the interpretations and beliefs, and continue to observe the subtleties of my inner experience without judging and without physically reacting and shutting down, the more treasures of insight I experience, even at the bottom of the well. This practice is often called meditation, and it can also be called holding space. Holding space is like when you listen to a friend going through a rough time. You just let them describe their experience and express themselves without judgment or trying to fix them. Holding space is an important quality of the healing process, the process of growth. And in that space, there's so much wisdom to discover, both for my friend and for me. And here's a fun fact. Daoist philosophy describes how the universe itself holds space for us. The space between heaven and earth. Isn't it just like a bellows? Hollow yet resilient. The more it is moved, the more it produces. That text is from the Tao Te Ching, one of the main texts of Daoist thought. A bellows is an old device which blacksmiths throughout the ages used to deliver a constant supply of oxygen to their fires, making them hot enough to heat and mold iron. The bellows is basically a flexible bag. At first in ancient China, the bag was likely like oxhide though soon they invented a more efficient double-action piston box bellows, blowing air both when it opened and closed. And there were even watermill-powered box bellows. In any case, the device is either squeezed or pushed and pulled to allow extra air to be directed into a fire, causing the fire to burn hotter than it would normally, a cauldron of transformation. The Daoist teaching says the space between heaven and earth is like a bellows. Heaven and earth is just an old phrase which basically means everything you can name. So between everything, there's a space which might seem hollow or empty, yet it's resilient. And legend tells of how modern physicists see that there's more space between what we call matter than, well, matter. Being resilient refers to the ability of the bellows device to return to its original size and shape after being compressed. Metaphorically, being resilient means the ability to maintain my structure while also being open to change. The more the space within the bellows is moved, the hotter the fire burns and the greater the metal can be transformed. The space within our consciousness is like a bellows. The more my perspective is moved to change, the more treasure of insights are experienced. The more treasure of insight is experienced, the more possibilities can happen, and the more my life transforms. When I've been attached to something, such as the outcome of some event, my body tightens with worry and I become anxious. Deep within me, some part of me is gripping hold with anxiety about what might happen. I'm so attached to it that I'm literally grabbing hold of the spaces in between, in my mind, my emotions, my body's muscles and tissues, and I'm basically in the middle of the bellows, preventing the air from getting out, or more accurately, causing the air to hit me in the head. My experience of looking within is not always fun. Often confusion, feeling less than, to put it mildly, and even growing pains and disorientation can be a natural part of learning something new. It can often be like that quote from Pirates of the Caribbean. "You're off the edge of the map, mate. Here there be monsters." Ah!
Perfect.
The space between what I know now and what I'll understand next can be quite an adventure. And the willingness to step onto the path of that journey can be like choosing to step out of what is comfortable into the unknown. Sometimes we need help to be in that space. Sometimes we need someone to hold that space for us so we can touch those places within us to grieve or be angry or embarrassed or afraid, or more often than we think, than I thought, even to acknowledge that it's okay to experience joy. To transform those mythological, shadowy monsters into integrated understandings and a more whole sense of self. One way I describe meditation is it's choosing to appreciate that space to listen, to learn. For me, this journey of meditation is like investing in the loss of my old experience of self, to head inward ever more deeply, to discover the character of what's real. If I resist seeing different perspectives, I've stopped learning and I've stopped growing. And seeing different perspectives isn't about believing anything. It's about a journey through my inner space and traveling to the limits of my imagination and experience. And then when I think I've reached the edge of known space, realizing there's still some tea left in my cup and choosing to empty it with even more subtle listening. Earl Grey, hot. Investing in loss is also key in martial arts. If you're unfamiliar with any kind of martial arts training, you might imagine it's all about physically overpowering your opponent. Physical fitness is important, though it's not just about who can bench press 500 pounds. It's more that it's difficult to do anything, let alone martial moves, if I'm quickly out of breath. I would argue that skill, strategy, and mental resilience are more important indicators. And while the training of specific skill sets in martial arts and martial combat might differ, the importance of strategy and mental resilience applies to both paths. Strategy includes such things as preparation, position, leverage, timing. There's others who are great teachers of martial combat. For me, I'm more interested in the physics of martial movement and the spiritual principles. So let's get into mental resiliency, because at its core, that's what this video is all about. How do I learn and grow and actually heal deeply in adversity? So classical martial arts training helps me learn to manage pain, fatigue, and discomfort, and fosters a deeper connection with the body and improves proprioception, which is crucial for healing. Martial arts training emphasizes physical grounding and stability, which, as we've discussed also, helps emotional and mental stability. Consistent training cultivates discipline, focus, mental clarity, and all essential qualities for navigating adversity. Martial arts training also typically involves a supportive social environment, which offers a sense of belonging and camaraderie, all that. And classical martial arts incorporates physical principles or philosophical principles that promote resilience, such as investing in loss. Martial arts training can also be a physical practice in which I examine my understanding of conflict. It provides a safe outlet for learning to control aggression, manage fear, and this builds my emotional resiliency and challenges me to be in the present moment. And that helps me be more mindful of what I'm experiencing in the moment so I can have healthy responses rather than letting things build up for later. So what happens when someone grabs me or punches me or takes a big stick and swings it at me? What happens inside me? What comes up for me in that moment? When I began studying martial arts, I would freeze or pull away or more likely get angry at how fast my opponent was moving. Some students react by wanting to fight back. As a beginner getting grabbed, I would only focus on resisting the grab and forget that my entire body was free to move still. And here's where the principle invest in loss shines in martial arts. Training over time, I realized, so my wrist is grabbed. Somebody grabbed my wrist, and I've lost the movement in one limb. It's actually really nice, because now I know where the opponent's hand is, and they now have one less fist to punch me with. And the more they hold on, the more I've gained the ability to control their center. Right up through their structure, I can connect to the spine. Over years of martial arts training, I've come to understand that the true essence lies not in brute force, but the subtle interplay of spaces. It's about the space between myself and an attacker's strike, the delicate geometry of joint manipulation, the alignment of our centers, and even the space between my perceived limitations and the actual mechanics of self-defense. These minute details are really important. Like music, martial arts is driven by rhythm, timing, the timing, duration, and emphasis of movements, punctuated by strategic pauses, basically patience. Just as the silence between notes shapes a melody, or the pauses between steps define a dance, the empty spaces in martial arts, the moments of yielding, leverage, and ungripping are where mastery resides. They are the spaces where position, leverage, and timing coalesce, and where the art, for me, comes alive. There's a bunch of classical teachings about Tàijí Chuán training, one of my favorite martial arts. I think this one relates to what my teacher was trying to teach me. Abandon one's own interests and follow others. Sounds majorly codependent. Give up yourself and follow others. In the context of martial arts, it actually means to keep an open mind. Be flexible and able to respond in the moment. I think it's a very groovy teaching. This principle teaches me to stay connected to my partner, to follow the pattern of their movements. If my partner attacks, I let go of my own interests and just stay connected. If they advance, I stay connected and yield. And when they retreat, I stay connected and follow. You know, this may not seem like much of a defense, but in practice, it feels totally freaky to my partner. Like they can't escape and they end up either overextending themselves or unexpectedly drawing me in closer. Invest in loss also means to yield. Now, the very first lines of the Tàijí caution us that words are a difficult way to explain something, as we each often have different definitions and experiences of those words. For me, yielding doesn't mean weak and soft. In my world, yielding is actually a simultaneous defense and attack. I maintain my bone structure while letting my nervous system handle the muscles. In other words, I ungrip myself by allowing space between my muscles and my bone structure. Yielding is done by maintaining a connection and having patience, listening for the best timing to respond. Sometimes that means listening for their attack and seeming to respond even before their attack appears. When I yield completely, one advantage I gain is I preserve my own structure, my rooting, much like how a tree that can bend in the wind survives. My partner's attack actually moves me into a way more rooted and grounded position. And now I can utilize my training to sense, to listen for the qualities of the attack, its direction and speed and force. This allows me to be highly specific in how I neutralize and counter. Once I yield, I can now more appropriately respond according to my training, whatever I know. Staying connected and yielding takes patience and some courage. When an attack comes in, it can trigger a stress response for me where I can't talk. A stress response where I might overreact. Overreacting means to leave your center and try to push the attack away or try to grab and control it. Here, my partner overreacts to my attack. It just transforms the attack and makes it easier for me to reach him. The direction and force of the overreaction moves me into a different attack. Abandoning my own interests and following others, for me, means to give up the fear of needing to control others and instead empty my cup of all expectations and intent. It might seem strange to say that martial arts is about giving up the need to control the opponent's movements. I think it's more about the strategic interplay of body positioning, and then I can use my techniques properly. When we look at the superficial appearance of martial arts, it seems to be a competition where each participant seeks to gain an advantage. Through martial arts training, I gained a deeper understanding of human nature and the nature of conflict. Martial arts training has been a journey of self-discovery. Gaining an advantage can mean uncovering my own strengths and weaknesses and using this knowledge to grow as a person. In a Daoist approach to martial arts, gaining an advantage can mean yielding to an opponent's force, redirecting it, and ultimately achieving victory without resorting to aggression. If I'm focused only on my own desires for the outcome I'd like to see, I've stopped listening. When I stop listening, I end up reacting, typically overreacting, and I have to use more force to make something happen. If I use force against an experienced martial artist, they just use that force to fuel their next attack. When I stop listening, I stop appreciating the magic of the physics within the martial encounter, of trusting that space of possibilities. Experiencing martial throw happening without force is so cool. If I feel the force of the technique, like if I muscle someone to the ground, I'm actually having some of that force go back through me. I'm slowing it down. I'm in the way of the bellows again, getting in the way of the physics of motion. I just do my best to position my body structure and be aware of having patience for the correct timing to allow physics to handle the power of the techniques. In martial arts training, the power of yielding, investing in loss, reveals itself in a very tangible way. So take a closer look at my opponent. When they attack and I yield completely, there's a moment when my partner experiences me as disappearing. Really. They expect resistance. They expect something to hang on to grip onto, to punch. That expected support is gone, so they lose balance, even for just an instant. Here I yield and my partner's attack is dissipated, and they lose balance, which means I've controlled their spine or their center. In Tàijí Chuán, there's a saying, 4 ounces to move 1,000 pounds. In the pause when my partner is off balance, it becomes super simple to move them. Hamster Sensei has suggested I take a moment to acknowledge those martial artists out there who, upon looking at the video of my opponent punching me and losing balance, said to themselves the same thing I would have said. Trained fighters don't punch like that. My martial arts partner did his best to simulate someone losing their balance after attacking and to make it extremely obvious for this philosophy video. I will say, though, that even trained fighters, when they expect to hit a target and their opponent just creates space for their attack to be dissipated, will have a moment of increased contraction of the back of their body to keep centered, a subtle rocking motion. Of course, they would likely use that motion to move into the next attack. I just wanted to point out that we didn't have electrodes or something hooked up to my partner's calves to record the subtle muscle contractions. So for the purpose of this video, we made the motion more obvious. I think he did a great job, and I hope that covers it. So when my partner tries to find my resistance to grip hold of, and instead finds empty space, they end up overextending. Their nervous system realizes this and contracts the calves and the back of the body, the back chain, to pull back. We can see this happen during training. Because I'm training to be sensitive, I can feel this quick body reflex and sense my partner is off balance. And because I've stayed connected, I gain an advantage. I can then follow this reverse motion and without force, using the physics of structure and motion to attack. In this case, I allow the natural spring of my structure to bounce them away. Yielding, relaxing, sitting back, investing in a moment of loss allows space for new possibilities. I give up trying to anticipate what they're going to do. I just stay connected, and the moment itself transforms into what's possible. This may take practice to achieve fully, yet that's the point of martial training. At least for me, martial training is about emptying my cup of everything I've become so I can stay connected and remember what I was before I started reacting to everything. For me, this is the meaning of grounding and maintaining one's center. I think this is a root teaching and forms the foundation for all other techniques. Yin and Yang of the Tàijí symbol are like drawing back a bow in archery. The bow yields back, collecting the energy of potential and reserve. Without pulling back completely, there's no energy to advance the arrow forward. As I yield completely, investing in loss and emptying my own cup of intent, the result is an appearance of empty space for my partner, in which they overextend themselves looking for some resistance, yet there's nothing for them to hang on to. So as I draw back the bow, not only is the seed of issuing the arrow planted, a better opportunity to apply martial arts techniques is also naturally created, all without having to force anything. I've learned if I ignore the principle of yin and yang, and if I just move however I want without connection, it's infinitely harder to defend myself. We train in martial arts to be able to stay present and maintain the connection and not freak out and either freeze or run away. If I'm not relaxed and connected, I can't be sensitive to the movements of my partner. this also might be good training for other aspects of life. You know, so this is the Tàijí symbol, like I said, and you have the Yáng, which is the part that goes up, the little tadpole that goes up, and then the Yin, which is the part that goes down. And so as it becomes nighttime, the Yin, there's a seed of daytime already starting, right? And then it goes up, and as it reaches the extreme of Yang, daytime, it's already starting to become nighttime. So this is the continuous cycles of life, whether it's in your cells, daytime, nighttime, the beginning of life to the end. All of these cycles of life are encapsulated by the Tàijí symbol. And and so what this shows is that the more we go to the extreme, the more something goes to the extreme, the more it turns to the opposite. The more it's daytime, the more it's nighttime. And it keeps revolving. But when we're gripping to hold on to something, we stop the movement within us. We stop the movement. We stop being able to experience things changing. And through meditation, through acupuncture and healing arts and therapy and all kinds of things, there's a way of looking inside where we can start the Tàijí symbol moving again for us. So far, we've explored the Daoist principle of finding value in the spaces in between. I've also shared some Daoist wisdom and my experiences with seeing the value of yielding and of listening within to experience an inner treasure of insight. For me, listening within, holding space, or meditation, is a practice to allow space for what's possible. Daoist wisdom sees this space of possibilities as an experience of deep spiritual connection, and teaches that yielding to allow this space of possibilities is a way of appreciating the innate character of what's real. In my experience, it's in this space of change where my perspective changes, that's where healing occurs for me. The Daoist concept of Wu Wei is all about investing in loss and experiencing how life can change and flow when we gain new insights and have our perspective change. I translate Wu Wei as do nothing and everything is done. I have a video about doing nothing, which I'll link to in the notes below. Basically, do nothing is a catchy way of saying I can change my experience of life when I do the inner work of re-evaluating my thoughts and feelings, which I grip so tightly. Learning to realize how deep and real the impact my beliefs have on my experience of life has been quite an adventure. Acknowledging myself in meditation takes a lot of raw honesty. And though through flexibility of mind and understanding how to see and hear things as metaphorical teachings rather than literal is what really seems to work. Still, realizing that I'm carrying out some way of thinking I didn't realize often felt like a shock. In New York, there's a Shaolin monk who teaches at the USA Shaolin Temple. Shaolin is a Chinese tradition of integrating movement and meditation, something the teacher at the temple calls action meditation. Shaolin monks train in martial arts and a style of Buddhist meditation, and through this practice, find a resolution to suffering. In an interview I saw, the reporter asked a typical question. I can't remember the exact words, though it was basically, if you practice Buddhism and seek peace and harmony, why do you also practice martial arts? And the monk replied, in meditation, you tend to meet yourself, and you better be ready. Emotional stress can feel like a punch in the stomach and take my breath away. Training to receive a punch in martial arts is an exploration of the dynamics of how I experience conflict. In classical martial training, we practice listening, staying connected, keeping our balance, and having patience. All things which I think are also part of a healthy relationship. I practice acupuncture and bodywork, and for decades I've had the great honor of people sharing their stories of pain, struggling, and healing. I say it's an honor not to be all fake grateful about it, but because each medical encounter has been a deep opportunity for me to learn and grow. By losing what I label the treatment, me being the person in charge of healing, one possibility is the encounter can instead become a two-way opportunity for growth. In my younger days, before I knew how to meditate and have my perspective change, life was overwhelming and felt like an attack. I was in a dark emotional place. And looking back, I can see how I was aware of a deep inner emotional conflict, though I was barely conscious of the full depth of it. Because I now know how to process things through meditation, every experience I have in life moves me to heal. Throughout my life, I've delved into so many different practices of mind, body, and spirit. And while all of them are useful, the one that works for me best, that leads to the deepest and most widespread change, is meditation. There's a book, The Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment, which is a translation of Buddhist explanations about the experience of life and how to learn and grow, what people label enlightenment. I remember reading a passage where the head monk is going on about how life is illusory, life's an illusion, and all that kind of thing. And then I read the student's response, and I literally laughed out loud with surprise. They actually dared to ask the question, if life is an illusion, then why are we meditating? So cool. And the head monk's response was also awesome. In flowery, literary Buddhist language, of course, the monk basically said, how was it before you started meditating? So whether life is real or not real, illusion or whatever, before I started meditating, my experience of life sucked worse. Meditation and the changes of perspective that came with it changed that experience. I invested time and focus on observing within myself to lose my old thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, and through it all gain an experience of peace. Healing is the ultimate space of investing in loss. In my work as a healer, every time I enter the treatment room, I invest in losing any preconceived notions I have and pause to experience the encounter as if it was the first time. I can invest in the loss of my ego and ungrip the need to know everything or to be right, and just be present. I don't ignore my medical training or experience, nor do I give up having healthy boundaries. I can, though, stay mindful of the space between what I know as a practitioner and what new information may present itself. There's a teaching in Zen meditation practice called Beginner's Mind. In the book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, the author says, in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the experts there are few. The more you know, the more likely you are to close your mind to further learning. When we know one way of understanding something, we tend to judge and filter out other possibilities. I've noticed this closes my mind and restricts my experience of life. Approaching the practice of healing with beginner's mind allows me to acknowledge the depth of the moment, to be open to how the patient and myself, as part of the whole experience, are presenting. And this is how I can be open to receiving healing from my patients. And by applying the same perspective in all the areas of my life, I can learn and grow in those areas as well. Indy, the light's going out. Now, all this mindfulness of one's experience may work great for classical medicine treatments like body work and acupuncture, where the patient has a basic level of health and wellness, and the moment isn't a health crisis, right? What about urgent situations? When performing CPR, the first 3 steps all involve conscious pauses for observation. Check the scene for safety. Check for responsiveness. And before doing anything, calling for emergency assistance. And each step in the emergency process calls for revisiting observation and staying aware of changes as they arise. Healthcare professionals can certainly be mindful of their breathing and level of tension as they respond. It's all about observing, connecting, and guiding the situation from crisis into a safe, neutralized place. It sounds just like martial arts to me. Imagine a first responder doing things however they decided in any order they chose. The whole team becomes confused, and there's less efficiency and ability to respond, and the person in need of help suffers. Over the years, my patients have showed me the real effectiveness of investing in loss to allow space between all the doing, to empty my cup and be more present. I'll never forget one of my patients I saw years ago when I was pretty new to the profession. She was an older woman with a number of physical issues and a lot of pain. And I seem to remember every time I pressed somewhere in her body, she would have to spit up phlegm or something. I remember I had to hold the garbage can up so she could spit. I remember really trying to help her and feeling anxious about how I'd be able to do that. So at some point during the treatment, she sits up, she pauses, she sits up, and she looks at me with her bright green angel eyes and says, "Darren, it's okay." I was suddenly able to take a breath, and I smiled. You know, we both did. And she laid back down, and for the rest of the treatment, I was able to tune in more deeply and gently. I observed her being able to relax more, and she thanked me for helping reduce her pain levels, though to this day I thank her for teaching me such a profound lesson. For me, invest in loss means to take a break from fighting, from resisting my feelings, and instead honor them by actually gently acknowledging the feelings and thoughts and stories I'm experiencing. You know, back in the day when I studied with Master Kimball, I was in a pretty heavy space. I felt like I hit bottom, like I had fallen down a well. It was cold, dark, helpless, and it sucked. And yet my teacher told me to invest in loss. Crazy, right? I was a good student though and listened to my teacher. And eventually, through learning to gently listen and observe within, I discovered how I was resisting being in that cold, dark place. Now, that might seem obvious. What I didn't realize until I looked deeper was how much my resistance to acknowledging my inner stories was keeping me there. Invest in loss taught me to turn around and actually stop running away from my inner experience and from a deeper understanding and a deeper experience of the flow of life. And once I did that, things started to change. I started to learn and grow. And it isn't the experiences of suffering themselves that helped me grow, as some might say. It was my conscious choice to use my smarts to listen to wisdom. You know, years ago, I used to hit my toe on the furniture all the time. My friend said, "Stop walking like a duck." Well, I didn't listen, and I just kept hitting my toe. Finally, years later, I remembered this deep wisdom and took it to heart, and guess what? I stopped hitting my toe on the furniture. Amazing, right? Yielding, investing in the loss of my ego, emptying my cup, allowed me to listen to wisdom and stop running and fighting and reacting. I chose to start doing my inner work, to see my life from a different perspective. Through choosing to look subtly and carefully, I gained a maturity and wisdom to see my life from a different perspective. I chose to have patience to invest in loss and learn within the depth of stillness. And I learned that it wasn't my life that needed to change. It was me. Have you had experiences of investing in loss in your life? Let me know in the comments. If you'd like to see more videos like this, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Leave me a comment and share this video with the people on your path. Thanks for joining me along the journey.